We attended the 50-51 protest in downtown Tampa, and the turnout today was comparable, if not larger. The group's message today: no kings and protect the Constitution.
On June 14, a day traditionally reserved for honoring the American flag, the streets of Florida told a different story. In Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg, and Sarasota, thousands of demonstrators filled sidewalks, intersections, and public parks not just to celebrate Flag Day, but to make a pointed political statement. June 14 also marked the 79th birthday of former President Donald Trump, and for many protesters, the date had become symbolic of what they called a turning point in the nation's democratic crisis. Banners reading, "No Kings," "End Authoritarianism," and "The flag belongs to all of us," waved alongside traditional stars and stripes. It wasn't a protest against the flag, it was a protest under it, reimagined as a symbol not of party allegiance, but of resistance to what many perceived as an authoritarian drift. The marches had been planned online for weeks, under the umbrella of the growing No Kings movement, a nonpartisan campaign denouncing perceived abuses of power by political elites, especially former President Trump. Activists claimed the date was too significant to pass up. "We're not here to burn flags or tear anything down," said Jamal Reynolds, a retired Marine marching with his teenage son in downtown St. Pete. "We're here because the flag means something, and we're not going to let that meaning be hijacked." The crowd was remarkably diverse. Military veterans walked beside immigrant families. LGBTQ+ groups stood beside Catholic nuns. College students chanted next to senior citizens, waving pocket-sized constitutions. One standout moment came when a group of cyclists, all wearing red, white, and blue helmets, rode in formation through Tampa's Riverwalk. Their bikes carried flags that read, "Freedom requires responsibility." In Sarasota, demonstrators gathered outside the historic Five Points Park, where families had brought picnics, chalked "Love Your Neighbor" on the sidewalks, and read passages from the Declaration of Independence aloud. The tone was peaceful, yet unmistakably urgent. "This is still our country," one speaker said into a megaphone, "but we have to fight for it in ways that honor the freedom we claim to love." At the same time, tensions bubbled beneath the surface. A small but vocal group of Trump supporters set up across from the main protest in Tampa's Curtis Hickson Waterfront Park. They waved "Keep America Great" flags and chanted back. Though no physical altercations occurred, the two sides traded words, and several protesters responded with chants of "Shame, shame" as the Trump group departed. Police presence was visible but measured. Officers kept a respectful distance while drones and body cams captured footage for public record. No arrests were reported. Still, the energy was volatile, like dry wood waiting for a spark. And across the country, that spark was already being lit. As darkness began to fall over Florida, reports came in from the West Coast. Los Angeles was boiling over, clashes had erupted, riot gear was deployed, flashbangs echoed through the streets. The peaceful unity of Florida's daytime protests was about to be tested by the chaos spreading across the nation. And watching closely, already preparing a response, was a name Florida knows well: Sheriff Grady Judd. As the sun climbed higher over the Florida skyline, the protests along the Gulf Coast took on a new energy, less confrontational, more introspective, and deeply personal. In downtown Tampa, a woman stood on the steps of a city library, holding a sign that read, "My grandfather fought fascism, I'm just holding the line." Her name was Lucia Morales, a second-generation Cuban-American whose voice cracked as she addressed a group of students gathered in the shade of a banyan tree. "I've seen what authoritarianism does to families. My parents lost everything in Havana. What we're seeing today isn't just about Trump. It's about the way power is shifting in America. And it's scaring people like me." Nearby, a young man in a U.S. Army t-shirt stood quietly with his hand over his heart as others around him chanted, "No kings, no crowns, just the Constitution." A journalist asked him why he came. His answer, "Because democracy only works if we all protect it." In St. Petersburg, a mother held a bilingual sign that said, "Respeto, respect. Justicia, justice." She explained that her family, originally from El Salvador, had lived in Florida for 19 years, and this was the first time she had ever marched. "It's not about being left or right," she said. "It's about feeling safe and feeling heard." All around her were voices rising with the same conviction. Muslim teens chanted alongside Jewish grandmothers. Black veterans traded war stories with white retirees who wore country-first buttons from elections past. The tone was clear. This wasn't about uniformity of belief, it was about a shared refusal to accept silence in the face of fear. And yet, for all the unity, conflict still found a way to echo. Just before 2:00 p.m., a small group of Trump supporters arrived at the edges of the Sarasota protest, waving a large "Keep America Great" banner. Some wore red MAGA hats. They didn't say much, but their presence alone stirred unease. The protest organizers, using bullhorns and walkie-talkies, quickly urged the crowd to stay calm, but a few protesters near the line shouted back, "Shame!" and "This is not your day." For a moment, the mood cracked. Police gently widened the gap between both groups, preventing escalation. The MAGA group eventually left. "This is what democracy looks like," one organizer reminded the crowd. "It's loud, it's messy, and yes, it includes people you don't agree with." There were no arrests, no fists, just tension, the kind that says, this country is still trying to remember how to argue without hating. Throughout the afternoon, moments of grace cut through the pressure. In Sarasota, a group of children handed out small American flags to marchers. In Tampa, a Baptist pastor led a moment of silence, followed by the reading of Frederick Douglass's "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." In St. Pete, a choir of college students sang "America the Beautiful" under a mural of George Washington. Each city offered a different texture, but the thread was the same. People from vastly different walks of life showing up not to burn the flag, but to reclaim its meaning. Still, not everyone was celebrating. Online, conspiracy theories ran wild. Commentators on fringe channels labeled the protests a liberal coup in disguise. One former congressional candidate called the marchers enemies of the state. The digital battlefield was heating up, and the narrative was being twisted in real time. And far from the relative calm of Florida's coast, another kind of protest was growing, one far less peaceful. In Los Angeles, tear gas had already been deployed. In New York, mounted police were being mobilized. D.C. was preparing the National Guard. What had started as symbolic unity was morphing, in parts of the country, into something explosive. Sheriff Grady Judd was watching it unfold, and he was about to speak. As Florida's protests wound down into calm twilight vigils, the rest of the country was beginning to unravel. At 6:13 p.m. Eastern Time, footage from Los Angeles lit up national networks, smoke drifting through downtown streets, the echo of flashbangs ricocheting off buildings, and protesters scattering as officers in riot gear formed tight lines. What had started as an anti-ICE protest linked to No King's Day had spiraled out of control after a group of demonstrators attempted to block a federal facility entrance. LAPD responded with riot control measures. Tear gas was fired. Bottles and rocks flew. The peaceful resolve that characterized Florida's protests cracked wide open on the West Coast. Onlookers shouted, "Hands up, don't shoot," while others used umbrellas and plywood boards to shield themselves. One woman was carried away by medics after being struck by a rubber bullet. Video of a teenager bleeding from his forehead went viral within minutes, and public opinion split like dry wood under pressure. Meanwhile, in New York City, the energy was different, but just as intense. Thousands of marchers filled the avenues, many wearing raincoats and waving soaked signs as a thunderstorm swept through Manhattan. Despite the downpour, the chants continued, "Protect democracy," "No one is above the law," and "This is what patriotism looks like." Celebrities joined the crowd in Washington Square Park. Actors, musicians, even a former senator, all standing shoulder to shoulder with protesters. Several gave impromptu speeches, calling for accountability, an end to political violence, and a return to truth-based governance. In Washington, D.C., protesters lined the outer security perimeter of the Capitol, many holding candles. The National Guard was already deployed in small numbers, but the mood remained solemn, heavy with the memory of January 6th, still fresh in the minds of security officials and lawmakers. But beneath the chants and candles, a new fear was growing: coordinated violence. Homeland Security issued an internal bulletin warning of opportunistic agitators using the No Kings movement as cover to instigate chaos. Social media intelligence teams flagged encrypted messages from extremist groups urging members to blend in with protests and push the line. In cities like Portland, Seattle, and Austin, law enforcement prepared for flashpoints. In some places, streets were already being barricaded. Officials feared not just riots, but something more strategic, more premeditated. Back in Florida, citizens watched the scenes unfold on TV, phones, and live streams. There was pride in how their own communities had demonstrated peacefully, but also dread that they might be next. The pressure reached the highest levels of government. The White House issued a brief statement. "We respect the right to protest. We do not condone violence. We ask for unity in this moment of national unrest." But for many, those words rang hollow. The images from LA were too fresh, the blood too real. And in moments like these, when the noise rises and truth gets distorted, voices of clarity are rare. But one voice was never afraid to cut through the noise. That night, with the country divided, smoke rising in one city and candles glowing in another, Grady Judd stepped up to the mic. And as always, he didn't hold back. By the time the clock struck 9:00 p.m. in Florida, the nation was glued to its screens. In Los Angeles, clashes intensified. In New York, drones hovered over candlelit crowds. On social media, tensions escalated in real time. Hashtags like No King's Day, Flag Day protests, and civil unrest dominated feeds. America wasn't just watching, it was unraveling. Then came the steady, Southern-accented voice of Sheriff Grady Judd, transmitted from a press room in Bartow, Florida. He didn't open with a preamble. He didn't wait for questions. He went straight to the heart of the matter. "You have the right to protest. You have the right to shout, march, write signs, post your opinions. You do not have the right to set fires. You do not have the right to throw bricks. You do not have the right to destroy cities. Freedom is not lawlessness." There was no teleprompter, no political filter, just Judd speaking like he always had, plainly and with purpose. His voice was calm, but his message was thunderous. "I've spent my entire career defending both the law and the Constitution. And tonight, I'm telling every citizen watching, these two things are not in conflict. They work together. But when freedom gets twisted into an excuse for destruction, we all lose." He condemned the violence in Los Angeles, calling it reckless, cowardly, and hijacking the voices of real Americans who protested peacefully today. But he didn't just speak to the rioters. He addressed politicians, too. If you're silent tonight, if you're worried about saying the wrong thing more than you're worried about saving this country, then you're part of the problem. We need leaders who defend the right to protest without defending destruction. Judd went on to praise the people of Florida, the marchers in Tampa, St. Pete, Sarasota, who had taken to the streets with passion, but without chaos. He made it clear, this is what protest should look like. And Florida had proven it could be done. We saw flags held high. We saw families marching together. We saw people speak their truth without tearing down someone else's. That's what makes America different. That's what we need more of. The most powerful moment came near the end, when Judd leaned forward slightly and addressed not just the cameras, but the entire country. "You want to protect democracy? Then act like it. Don't just demand rights, honor responsibilities. Don't just shout, listen. Don't just fight, vote. Because when this nation falls apart, it won't be because of one man. It'll be because good people let bad moments define them." He paused. His last words were clipped, deliberate, and unforgettable. No more excuses, no more destruction, You want to protest? Fine. But if you cross the line, we will arrest you. That's not a threat, that's the law. With that, Sheriff Grady Judd walked off the stage, no questions, no spin. His message spread across the country like wildfire. Clips of his speech were shared by journalists, veterans, teachers, and even some protest leaders who agreed with his words. One viral comment read, "You don't have to like the sheriff. But tonight, he spoke more truth in 5 minutes than most leaders have in 5 years." As the country drifted toward an uneasy sleep, helicopters still patrolled the skies in major cities. Police scanned rooftops, protesters gripped candles or shouted into the night. But in Florida, things were different. The message had been delivered, the line had been drawn. And thanks to Sheriff Grady Judd, everyone knew exactly where it was.